Welcome Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to talk about playing possum for the 24 Tour de France. We are Monday with only 4 days left before the Tour de France starts because if you're over in Europe right now, they're already going to bed. So Monday's over for the European riders right now. They got to get sharp and ready and everything has to be focused 100% for the 24 Tour de France that starts on Saturday, June 29th. But what about the three of the four favorites that are starting the 24 edition? How much possum can they play? We saw Dauphiné with Remco Evenepoel. He wasn't on his best form, but we saw him win the individual time trial. Remco Evenepoel had a solid individual time trial, but then he proceeded to get dropped on the mountain stages. Looked like he was riding steady and within himself and never blowing himself up on the last two mountain stages. But the first mountain stage after the individual time trial, he certainly went a little bit deep there, and I would say he got better on stage 8 as his form started to progress it. He gave interviews basically agreeing with what I just got done telling you, that he was happy with the way his form went and started to progress a little bit more through Dauphiné. Now, the rider who won Dauphiné, Primož Roglic, can he play possum at the 24 Tour de France? Well, he won Dauphiné, but he got dropped on the last mountain stage. He didn't win the individual time trial stage. And as I told you in yesterday's video on Beyond the Coverage, throughout all of his 4 Grand Tour wins for Primož Roglic, all of them had time trial victories in them. So how much possum can he play once we start getting into the 24 Tour de France? I'll cover that. But the third rider, Jonas Vingegaard. When we're talking about the rider who is the defending Tour de France champion, 2-time back-to-back, and beat Tadej Pogačar to win twice, can he play possum on the Tour de France stage, and how long can he play possum for throughout the early parts of the 24 Tour de France? All 3 of those riders crashed at the Basque Country on stage 4, and we know they've all had problems and haven't turned into their best selves, versions of their self, either at Dauphiné. Maybe Jonas Vingegaard has in training. We don't know. So maybe he can play possum. But when we start looking at Tadej Pogačar, well, he's got the possum card to play too, right? Kind of. None of us agree with that, not even myself, but maybe he can play it. He won the Giro d'Italia. Maybe he tells everyone that he's tired. But the problem is, in bike racing, when I start looking at some of the unwritten stuff about Jonas Vingegaard and his training, like we would love, all of us fans that love watching bike racing would have loved to seen the daily activities of Jonas Vingegaard. But all of the cycling teams, when they have a Jonas Vingegaard, they're always trying to keep it quiet. They don't necessarily want to tell you what it's like. But the problem is, what I'm here to tell you about on today's video is that once we get into stage 1, you're not going to be able to play possum. Not on stage 1. If the race is blowing up, if UAE team members start destroying this 200+ kilometer stage 1 with 6, 7 massive climbs. It starts climbing right from the start of the race, drops down, there's a little bit long descents where you get some kind of recovery, you go up another climb, but then once you get into the last 80 kilometers of the race, 4 categorized climbs, and the first 3 are beasts at about 7%, around 5, 6 kilometers long, and you only have about 50 kilometers between all 4 of those races when you hit all 4 of those climbs until you hit the summit of the last one, and then you got about 25, 27 kilometers into the finish. That of course is going to be a descent, so that's going to use up a bunch of those kilometers, and then a flat run into the finish of 10, 15 kilometers. So if UAE team members come into stage 1, they don't want to play possum. We know Tadej Pogačar, he doesn't really play possum, right? He puts out on Strava some fantastic training rides of 100-mile rides where he's blowing things up. He's put out points and times on Strava before the Giro d'Italia started, where I brought it up on Beyond the Coverage, and I said the guy was doing 500 watts, reaching into his back pocket, pulling it out, putting it on camera mode, and posting up how fast he was going behind the scooters. So Tadej Pogačar doesn't play possum, but will the other 3 guys do it? Well, we're going to find out really quickly in that 50-kilometer stretch on stage 1 when UAE team members are drilling it just exactly where a lot of their form is. It won't tell us where their best form could be, but it'll tell us that at least they're solid. Jonas Vingegaard will not be able to play possum. No matter what he does on the training before the Tour de France, no matter how hidden it is, Once we get into the last 80 kilometers of stage 1, if UAE team members start blowing the whole field up, and I think they're going to have to blow it up starting there with 80 kilometers to go with 4 climbs still left. They're going to have to blow it up on those category 2 climbs because the last one is not very difficult. It's about 5%. And that climb is it's steeper than, of course, the Cipressa when we're talking about Milan San Remo, and we've seen where the peloton's been able to hold together on that. But of course, the length of it is a little bit longer, and it's another percentage steeper at 5% instead of what you're normally looking at 4%. But it's pretty steady, which means you get a big draft. So what I think could happen on stage 1 and why these riders, the 4 favorites, can't play possum, if Tadej Pogačar is blowing it up and he can't reduce it down to himself and 1 or 2 other riders, then it's going to be a bigger group, which means he's going to have teammates on the front still. They didn't blow it up. It wasn't successful. We're going to see something like we saw at Milan San Remo, where you have a bigger group because UAE team members just can't make the selection. Tadej Pogačar has to race stage 1 at the final climbs, the last 80 kilometers of stage 1. He has to race it a lot like Milan San Remo in terms of he needs his teammates to blow up the peloton. He can't do it himself, and they need to blow it up before we get into the penultimate climb, or as the beginning of the penultimate climb starts, his teammates have to disintegrate the field. They got to start 4 climbs out, then on the penultimate climb, his teammates have to disintegrate the field. He cannot pull a Milan San Remo type effect with his team where they weren't strong enough to really blow it up on the Cipressa. He went into the Poggio, and then he had to do the destruction himself. But let's say UAE team members can start to blow it up. Tadej Pogačar lights it up on the penultimate climb. He gets a bit of a gap. He's got Remco Evenepoel with him. Now, I always tell you guys, you don't ride with the best rider in the world, but all 4 of these guys are the best riders in the world. If Tadej Pogačar goes up the road with Remco Evenepoel on his wheel, Remco Evenepoel has to work. You're like, he doesn't have to work. Well, he doesn't have to work. But if you got Primož Roglic back there and Jonas Vingegaard back there gapped off, Remco Evenepoel knows that this is a good selection. I'll say right up here on Beyond the Covers, if you're up with Tadej Pogačar and you've dropped the other 2, this is a good moment to work. You find other times to sit on Tadej Pogačar if he's stronger than you, but you work immediately with Tadej Pogačar, maybe not on the penultimate climb when it's 7%, but when you get on the last climb and it's at 5%, then you're probably going to have to work with the Slovenian a little bit, but you need to be very, very careful, because if you're taking pulls with Tadej Pogačar and you haven't been on your best form yet since the crash of stage 4, you do not want to find out that you are not anything other than 100% while you're pulling with Tadej Pogačar on the last and final climb of stage 1, or he's going to light you up and solo the whole thing. But do you work with him? You come through and you pull a little bit if you're not exactly certain where your form is. Even Remco Evenepoel, you take shorter pulls, you take a little bit softer pull than Tadej Pogačar. You wait till the summit of the climb. Once you get to the summit of the climb, it's 25, 27K into the finish of stage 1. Then you start going pull for pull with Tadej Pogačar, assuming your form is something close to 100%. If it's not quite 100%, and we're talking 95, you got to be careful because the Slovenian might light you up somewhere along the valley before the finish even comes. But if you believe you're 98% form and you're Remco Evenepoel, you got to pull with Tadej Pogačar if the other 2 are behind. Now, Jonas Vingegaard, what are we talking about in terms of him playing possum? Well, let's say he's up there with Tadej Pogačar and it's the other 2 that are dropped. It's Remco Evenepoel, it's Primož Roglic that are dropped, and you're Jonas Vingegaard. Can you afford to play possum? You can't afford to play possum. If you can eliminate those other 2 riders, you got to get rid of them. So when everyone's hiding their form coming into the 24 Tour de France, where us fans sitting on the Chesterfield would love to know exactly what kind of training Jonas Vingegaard's been doing. Primož Roglic has done since Dauphiné. Remco Evenepoel, what kind of training have you been doing every day of the week, the 2 weeks that you had between Dauphiné and the Tour de France? There is no possum that you're going to be able to play on stage 1 because we know Tadej Pogačar is going to light everyone up. And once he gets on the pedals and he's going 100% on the pedals, we're going to find out right away who has good form and who doesn't. And it will not be time to play possum, because let's say that it is Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglic that are dropped as Remco Evenepoel and Tadej Pogačar are going up the road. if Jonas doesn't start working right away with Primož Roglic and he still wants to play possum a little bit and he doesn't know exactly where the form is of Primož Roglic, they need to be careful because Primož Roglic just barely won Dauphiné and got dropped from Carlos Rodriguez and the American rider Jorgensen. So Jonas doesn't exactly know where Primož Roglic's form is either. So if he plays possum too long, and these two riders, Remco Evenepoel and Tadej Pogačar, work together, the Tour de France could already be over with on stage 1. So what I'm telling you right now, if you're Jonas Vingegaard, if you're Primož Roglic or Remco Evenepoel and you think you want to play possum on stage 1 with your form so you can try to hide it a little bit against the other Slovenian, Tadej Pogačar, the #1 ranked rider in the world, I'm telling you right now, you better be very careful because Tadej Pogačar, he doesn't play possum. He is going to throw down with his whole teammates on stage 1 and light things up. And if he has a gap and they're hesitating back there playing any tactics at all, before you know it, the Slovenian Tadej Pogačar could already gain 30 seconds to 1 minute on the whole peloton of the Tour de France on stage 1. So when all those riders and all those teams aren't putting out on Strava what kind of training they're doing and they think they can play possum on stage 1, there's no way, because with the form of Tadej Pogačar after winning the Giro d'Italia, trying to win the double here on Saturday, starting with the 24 Tour de France, there's going to be no possum out of the Slovenian Tadej Pogačar, and that is going to immediately make the other 3 favorites starting the Tour de France have to show their cards right away. If they're up the road with Tadej Pogačar or if they're chasing Tadej Pogačar, they're going to have to throw in with whatever riders they got around them, or Tadej Pogačar is already going to have a lead at the Tour de France on stage 1. Hope you guys liked my take here on Beyond the Covers. Got some more stuff for you. Maybe throw in a story time before the Tour de France starts proper. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.